Okay, so the first thing that we're going to want to do definitely is obviously prep our canvas for the background. And as I mentioned, I think in the welcome video, but if I didn't, you can do this where the background is just plain, you know, kind of like we did in our January project where it was just book paper and then we covered it in cream. You could do that, or you could actually do a scene with grass and like, you know, sky and grass. And I think for this one I will do the sky and grass, but I'm still gonna only use book paper. A lot of times I will use, you know, like colored paper like blues and greens, but I really like the little butterflies or the little hearts or whatever you want to use are going to be so tiny and minute that if you have so much going on, they're not going to stand out. And that's like the coolest thing of this whole project, is all of those little things coming off. So the really simple, the first thing that we need to do is use a brush that isn't hard as a rock. That's typical me. And actually this decoupage could use a little bit of water to it. It's a little thick and pasty. So I'm just putting a coat of decoupage down. And then I'm just going to put down my book paper, and I want kind of as clean as lines as possible. You could also use pattern paper for this. That would be really cute, because that overlaps really nicely. I'm just getting some water. My decoupage is crazy stiff. Or thick or whatever. Not stiff, but so much so that it's giving me some grief here. And it doesn't usually. So I'm just gonna do my goodness, I might just not use my decoupage altogether. I just use my matte medium. Good thing about a fire in the winter is it keeps you warm. The bad thing is it dries out everything, even with the lid on. All right, matte medium, here we go. So I just want to get a nice coat down. For some reason I've got tons of bubbles, and it normally doesn't bother me, but I keep thinking about how I want this to turn out. I just want as little going on in the background as possible. Okay, I am going to let this dry, or get a dryer on it and dry it. And I'm just kind of rubbing out all the bubbles. Even if it makes wrinkles, it's okay. I just want to get all the air bubbles out. But the next thing I want to do is I'm going to paint on my background, like my sky and my thing. So I'm going to dry this, and then we'll grab some blue and green paint, and we'll be right back. Alright, so once our paper is dry, before we start with the watercolor kind of things, it's really good to put a coat of gesso down first, because is this clear? Oh good, phew, I was about having a panic attack right there. It's really good to put a coat of clear gesso down because it gives it something to stick to. And whereas we use the Mod Podge or even the matte medium, it's a very slick surface, so it doesn't give it anything to like tooth, like, you know, kind of soak into or stick to. So just gonna put a coat of the the clear down. And you could put a coat of the white down actually. It might look good because then you don't have so many words. So I actually might come in here with a little bit of white and just put some here and there. Let me grab Really fast. Because I don't want the words to be that kind of noticeable. Yes, this is gonna be perfect. Love it. So I put the clear, but I'm also putting the white, and I still would probably put a clear because I'm not getting white everywhere. I mean, I've got pieces in here that are kind of showing through. So that's your gesso. Now we've got to let this dry, and then we're going to come on with the water soluble products that I'm going to show you a bunch of different ones that you can use and get pretty much the same result with all of them. So let me get this dry and we'll be right back. Okay, so this is dry. It's got our coat, mostly dry enough until you probably get started. And I've gathered some water soluble things. So you've got gelatos. If you've never used gelatos, they're from Faber-Castell, and they are a water-based, well, I'm not really sure if they're water-based, but you can use them with water, and then once they dry, they actually are permanent. Same actually with their pens. You could probably do this technique with their pens. Maybe we'll try it. Just because you could add water to it and it will dissipate and stuff. Of course, you've got Neocolor crayons, the Carandiache, I think. I'm actually not really sure how to say that. I never have really known how to say it. Which are a water-soluble crayon. You can also use, now all of the things that I'm showing you for the most part, once they dry, are going to be pretty permanent. For sure the crayons are and the pens are. It gets a little trickier with actual watercolor products because they will like reconstitute, but you have to add a lot of water. They're not what we're doing to them, if we're careful enough, it's not going to reconstitute and even enough to like make a difference, and I'll show you how to do that. So there's a little bit of trick. Now what these ones are a mix of tube watercolors. So you have your pigment in like this form of a really pigmented kind of creamy substance. This is also made up of Neocolor crayons like this. You just take your crayon, your wax crayon, and these are little trays by Tim Holtz. We actually carry them in the store, and they are for his inkwells, but they're great for like watercolor tubes. This whole one is full of my watercolor tubes, and then I think there's a couple of ink tints in here, but for the most part those are all these tube paints, and you just need a little bit. You don't put a whole lot in there. You don't empty out your whole tube for sure, just put a little bit because they're so pigmented. And then these are a mix between gelatos. So like if I want to use my gelatos, you know, and I want to use them wet, so I'll put a little bit of that in here dry. You can use your Neocolor in here. You can use Inktense blocks. You can use your water soluble wax pastels. I don't really like wax pastels for this particular thing, but just because I don't enjoy using them at all anyways. The water soluble ones. And then also you can use watercolor pans, which for me are probably my favorite thing. It's what I use most. It's what I carry around most. They range in price all over the board. We carry some in our shop. That's these ones. They don't look this messy when you get them. They look nice and pristine and clean when you get them. Or you can even go, they have a great brand, Artist Loft. I mean, they're not like the nicest, most high quality, but they're great enough for what you want. Artist Loft at Michael's, which is a great brand too. So we are just going to get started. I think this is dry enough. The other thing that you're going to want is a mop brush like we talked about in the supply list, and this is just probably a 1-inch brush. In our store we carry 1 inch, I believe 3/4 inch, 1/2 inch. I'm just using a 1 inch because I'm doing a large surface. Usually when I do watercolor I use a smaller one, so I'm actually surprised I even have this on hand because I don't tend to use them. This is it. It's a 3/4 inch. That's what it is. So, and it's a little stained, but that's okay. Let's get this off. Okay, so I am going to use a mixture of my pans and then crayons and stuff because whatever is in here. So let's actually just start with the green down below. So this right here is a gelato. I am just gonna get my mop brush wet, and I'm also gonna come in here and spray that. I'm gonna use a mixture between the gelato and whatever this is. I don't know, it's something, because I kind of like this green color. So I get some water in there, and then I'm just gonna come down here and lightly kind of go over the grass area. And I'm going to add in this color of green too, which is this gelato, just because I want a couple of different looks. Okay. Don't want it all to be the same color of green. It's going to be very, very light, so you might not even be able to see that very well. But that's how light you want your wash to be. And that's how light watercolor is going to be. It actually is going to dry lighter than that. So we'll come in here with the same on our watercolors. And I'm going to use a couple of different blues. So for my pans, what I'm going to do is I need to mix myself on a different palette. So I'm actually just going to use the top of this. And we're just going to come on and put this down. I'm using this other color too. Needs a little bit more water in it. And the more, to me, the water, the better, just because I like how it sits. Like, you're gonna get a really cool effect to it that way. Now you could let this dry and put another coat on, or you can come in with it wet. And let's use a different color of blue. Let's go in with, let me find a good blue. Maybe this one. This was the gelato. Whatever this one is, I'm not sure, but. Rinse that out and add a little more green to the bottom of this. And these are my tubes. They're still wet from when I used them the other day, so I'm just going to take a teeny bit of it. The tube paints are so pigmented, you're going to see the difference big time there. Okay, and really that's like it. We're gonna let this dry for a little bit, and I tend not to use my dryer when I watercolor very much, but we're kind of doing this for mixed media. It doesn't bother me too much that I am. So I'm gonna use my dryer to kind of dry this, and then we'll probably put another coat of the watercolor on just to give it a little bit more movement too. And actually, I really like blending colors while they're wet because it gives it a cool kind of effect. I just need to find a better blue, like a different shade. Like, let's go with this turquoise blue. Now, where this is already wet and there's a lot of water sitting on the surface of it, it's going to just kind of what's the word? It's not pile. Is it pile? Pill? It's just going to kind of meld into this other color that we already have on them, and the two are just going to blend, which is going to be kind of cool. And if you wanted to throw in, just for fun, you could throw in a little bit of yellow here and there. It's going to kind of make you a green though. I'm just trying to keep it really light. Alright, so let's just let this dry. And if we want, we can add a little bit more green. Okay. Now you never ever keep your watercolor brushes like in your water with what do you call it, mixed media brushes. It doesn't matter, you can leave them in there, it's totally fine. You know, I mean, obviously you gotta wash them out sometime, but the watercolor brushes I suggest not, just because it will ruin them, and they are a little bit, not too much pricier, but you just want to make sure you take care of them according to how they need to be taken care of. So now we're just going to let this dry, and when we come back, if you feel like you want to add more color to it, because watercolor dries lighter than you see, so lots of times you come back and be like, oh, it's not as light as I thought it would be. Or maybe you want to add some more into it. Another really actually fun thing that you can do at this point, and this might be a little too wet for it, but if you wanted to add some texture to it, you could sprinkle some salt into it right now, and it will like kind of, wherever the salt is, it'll eat at the color and leave, you know, like just a pocket of uncolored substance or whatever, because it obviously eats the color away. However, the wetter it is, then you have bigger, like these big, like the salt just goes like it makes these big messes. So for me, I prefer it to be much drier than this, and then right at the end maybe I'll sprinkle in a little bit of salt, and if I'm going to add some texture to it. So I'm not going to do that right now because it's way too wet. I've got to let it dry, and then when we come back we will see where we're at, see if we want to add some more color to it, and see if we want to add anything else just to kind of give it like a fun little pretty color. So we'll be right back. Okay, so it's a little bit dry. It still is somewhat wet, but I am just going to take, and you can see it's just salt, and I'm just going to like sprinkle it actually just around the edges, because I don't want, I mean, and I'm like barely, I don't want a ton of texture to it. I don't know if you guys can see that. See where I sprinkled the salt on that watercolor? And I just am going to let it sit there till it dries the rest of the way, and then I'll go on and actually wipe the watercolor, or wipe the salt off once it's dry. But for right now, I'm just going to leave it on there, because you just let it sit. If you go to wipe it off now, it's just going to make it'll go through all your stuff and make it wet. So go back to drying it, and when we come back it'll be dry and we can move on. I'm loving it already. Alright, the canvas is fairly dry, so I'm just going to go in here and kind of like, maybe it's not. It was dry down here. Wipe away that salt. And you can see where I wiped it right down here, where the salt has just like eaten into the spots of the canvas. Or not the canvas, but the paint. Okay, that's obviously not dry there. Annoying. Oh, it's taking me forever to try this. That's the only bad thing about using watercolors, but the effect of it is so cool. I really like it. Now, I can already see that I kind of want to add, I mean, I do like all the different, I don't know if you guys can see it with the video and the lighting and stuff in here, because I have my studio lights, camera lights on, but there's like some kind of like cool spots going on. Like, it's not all even, and I love that about it. I do want to add a couple of really fun kind of drips coming down a little bit. So I'm just going to go back to my mop brush, and I'm going to just grab, try to think. I mean, I want it to be like some fun colors, maybe not just blue. So how about we do a little bit of pink. I'm going to do this really light pink. Now you want to make sure your other layer is pretty dry, because if not, you're going to get, you know, if you mix colors that aren't both warm or both cool or whatever, you're not going to get very good results. You're going to get a moppy mess of brown when the colors mix. I'm going to make sure I just get a lot of color on here. Then I'm just going to kind of take it across the top. And I mean, I have like just a teeny bit. I don't even know if you guys can see that color on there. Maybe I should make it a little darker so you can see it. I certainly don't want to ruin it. So I'm going to put just a little bit of color, and then I'm just going to let this drip down a little bit. Just a little bit. And see how we just get these really light, gorgeous drips across the top? It's just so pretty. And if we want, we can, while that's wet, we could add a second color in, like a yellow maybe. But I want to clean that brush off. And I want it to be a super bright color. So I'm going to use a smaller brush. And I'm going to use these pans because they are way pigmented. So just going to take a little bit of this. I mean, not pans, the tube paints are way pigmented. And I'm just going to add, I'm nervous, maybe a little bit here and there. And I'm just going to take it and let it run just a teeny bit. Not too much. Just like that. I don't want it any more than that because I really want to keep the focus, you know, add some, I want to keep the focus of this here. I don't want it coming all the way down through. And I'm actually going to even take my rag and just kind of dab some of that back a little bit because I don't even know if I want it that strong. Not with yellow anyways. I think pink would be okay. But let me see what I've got in the way of pink in this. I always forget how to open this thing. And I like to layer it over the color that's already on there because it does this really cool, like I said, when you put wet watercolor over the top of wet watercolor, it does a pretty cool like effect. You mainly see it once it's dry, but okay. And honestly, that is like as little I want to do for right now. I can add more later, but I really want to not have a whole lot going on up there. We could do that down in the grass though if you wanted to. Add a little bit of like a pop in there. Like this lime green would pop out just a little bit. Just add that in. And then if you want, you can spray a little bit of water on there, but I'm just gonna let what's already on there do its job. Maybe I'll spray it a little. Go. All right, let's wash out our watercolor brush. Now we're gonna let that dry, and again, if you want to hasten it with using your water thing, you can for sure. Now I chose to use two, pink and yellow, because the paper that I'm going to be using is pink and yellow. So I'm not introducing like any new colors to the palette, so it's not going to be too crazy as far as like the color goes. And I am going to pull some of this back a little bit just to keep it calm. It's all just subtle layers. It just looks, You want it to look light and airy, very light and airy. That's what watercolor is. Even though these aren't really watercolor, these gelatos, they're gonna give you the same really gorgeous kind of effect. Some of their paints, I will say, are a lot more yeah, that's pretty dry. Well, they've got some that are just really pigmented, the colors are. Let's add a little bit of that to there. That's just the gelato. Gonna get it wet a little bit. And let it drip just a tad bit. Let me see. I've got this hot pinkish one. I don't want a lot of it, but I think it would add. And you can mix the gelato up off of the canvas, you know, just like we did in the pan, or you can put it directly on here. Off of the canvas, you have more control. That just gives it a little bit of brightness. All right, I think it's good. Okay, gonna let this dry all the way so that we can put our dress on it, and so we will be back.